Lucy Hanson, our guest speaker at the 390th Memorial Museum, was a witness in her childhood to the food drop missions organized by the American and British Air Forces during World War II. She will present a civilian's perspective on the war. To better understand her experiences, please enjoy the following 2-minute U.S. Army Air Forces documentary describing these very flights, followed by a brief message from the museum director. The video of her visit at the museum will follow shortly after.
Eighth Air Force heavies dropped food in Nazi-occupied Holland at Utrecht, Rotterdam, and Amsterdam during April and the first part of May. At the Great Ashfield base in the Midlands, B-17s were loaded with U.S. Army rations to be dropped to starving Dutch civilians. Some missions had to be scrubbed when German commanders were reluctant to negotiate a short armistice, guaranteeing planes safe passage on the Mercy runs. RAF heavy bombers also engaged in these food-dropping sorties. Skimming the water, the formations passed over beach obstructions on the Dutch coast, flooded areas, ruined villages, and the hungry, waving populace. The Germans had agreed to complete immunity for Allied planes in 10 dropping zones from 700 hours to 1,500 hours daily. However, some bomber crews noted rifle and light anti-aircraft fire. The first dropping was at Utrecht. Another mission was to an airfield about 5 miles southwest of Amsterdam. The Luftwaffe had recently operated from this base. Now, instead of a swastika, a cross marked the zone that meant protection for Allied planes. By May 1st, enough food had been dropped to feed 4 million persons for one day. In contrast to the days when Nazi planes brought destruction to Rotterdam, Allied planes were now bringing Dutch cities sustenance.
Hello, this is Bill Buckingham, the Executive Director of the 390th Memorial Museum located in Tucson, Arizona. Before Lucy Hanson's presentation begins, allow me to briefly describe a few of the events during World War II in her home country of the Netherlands. The Germans had implemented specific actions to starve a large portion of the Dutch civilian population in the areas of the Netherlands which they still occupied near the very end of the war. Much of Europe had been liberated from the Nazis by the Allied armies, but not this portion of Holland. The 390th Bomb Group played an important role in saving many Dutch lives from this starvation by undertaking very risky, low-level flights over designated drop zones. Flying only a few hundred feet above the ground, which was still occupied by the German army, was hazardous indeed. The Germans had blocked off all incoming food from surrounding countries and flooded most of the agricultural fields, cutting off the civilian population from all sources of food. On April 28th, the Dutch government in exile made an urgent plea for help to the Allies to intervene and prevent the mass starvation of the civilians trapped by the Nazis in the Netherlands. By the end of hostilities, but before the formal German surrender, over 20,000 Dutch civilians had died of starvation. United States General Dwight Eisenhower ordered a series of aerial food drop missions. These became known as Operation Chowhound. The 390th Bomb Group was one of 10 American bomb groups ordered to participate. The groups would go on to deliver over 3,481 tons of food to the Dutch civilians. It was a rare example during World War II of using heavy bombers to drop life-saving food rather than bombs. Converting a large heavy bomber to a food-dropping machine challenged the 390th Ground Crews to develop special slings to carry the crates and sacks of food within the aircraft. The 390th's first Chowhound mission was on May 1st, involving 40 of their aircraft. The flight crews were nervous at the thought of flying at 200 or 300 feet above the ground rather than their more typical 26,000 feet. Only a verbal agreement between the occupying German forces and the Allies provided assurance that the aircraft would not be fired upon. That mission and the following 5 missions were successful. Even today, we have Dutch visitors to the 390th Memorial Museum who express their thanks for the efforts of the American and British Air Forces for risking their lives to save them from starvation.
My honor to have Lucy as a friend, and it's an honor, for her to be here and for us to have her here. And Lucy was about 11 years old when the Germans invaded and occupied her country. So just briefly, she's going to tell her story about how she and her family survived when, according to a book called Operation Chowhound, 25,000 of her countrymen did not survive. They died of starvation. So I'll hand it over to Lucy, and hopefully we'll really learn some important facts that we may not know and appreciate more of what these people went through. So Lucy.
I feel very honored, and like I say, when people talk about war, you think about armies shooting at each other, and but we forget that in those countries there are people living. And you don't hear much about that, but they go through the war in a very different way. Like, I lived in Holland, in a little country, and one morning we woke up and the Germans had invaded. Well, when you're 10 years old, you don't even know the word invade. But the Germans had invaded and they were going to take over our country. Well, I had learned about Germany and they spoke German and things like that, but thank goodness there was no real fighting in my area where I lived. I lived about 25 miles south of Amsterdam, and the Germans are all the way in the east. It took them 5 days to come into to overlook or overwalk my country. So things start changing right away. The war is over, hurrah. The first thing we had to do when they invaded our country was hang heavy curtains over our windows, so the planes that were flying over could not see where the villages were. So that was a big thing. Then we had to be very safe and careful with the use of water and gas and electricity. Oh well. We survived that, but then we were under a different kind of government. And we didn't like that, of course. But it takes a lot of taking over. Anyway, it is a very difficult feeling when you hear, for instance, that we had radios and we listened to the Dutch news. Well, the Germans didn't want us to know what was happening, so they just told us what they wanted us to know. So one day we wake up and there was a big announcement. Everybody with a radio had to go to the high school and deliver their radio to the Germans. Well, some people, of course, did, because they are afraid that if they do not obey the rules, they will get shot. Some people just kept the radios, of course, and hid them in a closet or under the floor, so we could listen to the news of the world, and that was in London, England. So that's how we, all through the war, we listened very clandestinely to Radio Orange. So that was one of the things. Then a little while later, life goes on, we go to school, and life goes on, but it is different because you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. So one morning we wake up and we had to bring our radio. Well, I talked about the radios. We had to bring in our radios. In those days we had silver money with a picture of the Queen on there, Queen Wilhelmina. And we were not allowed to have our own silver money. So one day or 1 week we had the chance to go to the high school or the bank and bring your money, and then you would get paper money back. And now all of a sudden I have a flash, because my grandfather said, "Oh, for my dead body do they get my money?" They tried to get everything, but not my money. So he dug a hole in the backyard and went through the family and said, "We don't give them our silver money." We were poor for a while because we didn't have the paper money either. But after the war, my grandfather had a bracelet made for me from all the little dimes, the silver dimes. And I was going to wear it this morning, and I forgot.
You want to talk any about seeing the airplanes dropping food?
Oh, I haven't done that yet? No. Oh!
Please.
See, that happens when you get older. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. No. We were so hungry. And finally we heard that they were going to the planes would come over. Thank goodness I lived in a town south of Amsterdam with heather fields. And between all the villages and towns, there were big heather fields, and they had made a big white cross. I don't know what they used for the white, but there was a big white and then we were lucky enough. We lived on the outside of town, so we could just stand in our backyard and then look a ways, because they didn't throw it close to the houses, of course. They did it right in the middle of the heather fields, and that's where the planes would drop the food. Well, we were very excited, you know. This was, I think it was the end of April of 1944, because we were liberated May 5th, 1945. That's always in my mind. May 5th, 1945. We were liberated. This was the end of April. And everybody, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we stand on the outside of town in our backyard, and we are still, and here come these huge, I had never seen a huge plane like that before. and there is one here. I think you have a Lancaster here, but I remember the food in my town came from a B-17. I'll never forget that, B-17. And it would happen around noon, so everybody, lots of people. It was all cordoned off because you just couldn't go to the heather fields and just catch whatever comes out. You know, it was all organized by the Dutch, not the Germans, the Dutch, because there were still we still had a little government, controlled by the Germans, of course. And gosh, we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And here they came. Oh my gosh, I think there were only 2 or 3 planes because, you know, they are so big and Holland is so small. One plane would cover a whole county, you know. So, and people were standing on the top of the houses with white, not flags, of course, but white sheets. Oh gosh, we didn't know what was going to happen. Well, here we see, they were low enough, they were pretty low, they were very low, and you see these doors open up in the belly. And here came all these boxes and bags, and we didn't know what to think. We were so excited. Everybody stood there crying. It didn't last long, maybe 20 minutes or so, and then they would leave. And then the organization, or the town organization, would come and pick up all the food and on their bicycles bring it downtown, because we had no trucks. Nobody in Holland had a truck or a car. All we had was bicycles. Would carry it all, or with big wagons downtown, and then we got food coupons, and you got so much rice and so much beans and so. But after a few hours, after the droppings and everything was picked up, then us kids had a little dish, and we would walk into the gather fields and picked up what was broken, you know, bags of beans and rice and flour had broken, and there were little heaps laying here and there. Well, we didn't mind about anything. We just grabbed it with our hands, sand and all, and heather and all, and brought it home. That happened twice, or 2 or 3 times. That we had dropped. I think it's only 2 times that we had droppings. And then, like I said, this was the end of April, and May 5th there was peace. We had no more war. Not that meant that we had lots of food right away, because all the food that was dropped, oh man, that was gone in a few days, of course. The main thing I want to talk about is fear. The fear of being hungry, the fear of your dad being gone to a foreign country and you don't know if he will ever come back. So, but we survived. So we had to bring our radios, our silver money, and then further on and we had to register. Everybody got a little Ausweis. When you've turned 15 years old, everything, your whole life history was under this little Ausweis, and you had to carry that with you at all times. Well, lots of people didn't want that Ausweis, so they always lived in fear, you know. Not living in freedom is a horrible feeling, because you always think, oh God, am I allowed, can I do this or can I do that? So, and then on top of that, we had quite a few Jewish people in our town, in our country. And well, in the beginning you obey the enemy and you do everything, so they had to get an Ausweis also. But they also got a big yellow J, and they had to sew that on their clothes. So losing your freedom is so terrible. I cannot explain how it feels that you are so scared that you may do something wrong. Well, anyway, we got our Ausweis, they got their J's, but then, after a couple of years, our food storage was diminishing. And we go through this now here. Oh, there is not this and there is not that, and that's not coming into the country. Well, anyway, food was getting very scarce. Thank goodness the Dutch people know how to grow food and potatoes and things like that. So my dad had a little plot of land as big as this room, where he and his dad, so Grandpa and my dad, they grew their own potatoes every year. They did every year. Potatoes, vegetables, beans, cauliflower, everything. And then, well, we had no freezers, of course, but potatoes you can keep under the house in the cellar. They stay good. Maybe you know that, but nowadays everything comes from the store, right? Thank goodness we had potatoes, so that was our hunger. So the hunger started. But it was not only the hunger, it was all the fear, because in Germany, all the men were in the army or the navy or the air force, but Hitler needed people in the factories. And that was the hardest thing for us children, that he came to the houses and say, wo ist dein Vater? And my mother had taught me to tell them that he was working in Germany in the factories, But that was really happening. One morning we woke up, and thank goodness my father registered, because he was already 43 years old. And it was between men between 18 and 40. So he felt safe. Well, he wasn't. He registered anyway. And he came back because he was 3 years older, and his work boss had told him the factory could not work without him and things like that. So my dad never had to go to Germany, but all my friends, their dad had to go. They were put on trains and taken to camps, and they had to work in the German factories to make the airplanes and the bombs and whatever they needed. So that was what I would like to emphasize, is that we have to think of the people who are occupied by other people and are in war. Fear is the biggest thing that happens to those people. We couldn't listen to the radio. Our dads had to go to Germany. Our food resources were disappearing. So there is more to war than just fighting. And that's mainly the things I want to talk to. Now you think, well, yeah, but in America we have everything, Holland, I have a map, I got a map, and Holland is a very, very little country. There were only something like 9 million people in my country. Now, little Holland is right here with 9 million. Here is Germany. He had occupied Denmark already. He was already in France. He was all over. Now, why did he want that little Holland? Well, we are on the North Sea with big harbors. So a lot of things from the other part of Europe came in the harbors into Holland. Well, the Germans locked up the harbors. No ships could get in. So that was one of the things that, we had no food came in. So that was very, very scary. Well, you go over it now, it's just, oh, this is not here, this is not in the store. Pfft. We had nothing in the store. So after 3 years, there was very little in the store. So we depended really on our own. Okay, I'll sit again. The main thing was that our dads were not here. Thank goodness my dad was. But he was hiding in the house. He didn't dare to walk in the street because he would be picked up, sent to Westerbork, to a camp, sent to Germany. So it was the women who were very, very strong. So we ran out of everything. I had a bicycle. You know, in Holland everybody has a bicycle. Well, after a few years, nobody has tires on his bicycles. So when we were very, very hungry, my mom said, we have to do something. So she was always very good. She could do wonders with a few potatoes. So many people went on their bicycle, women went on their bicycle to the east side of our country where all the farmers were. And don't bring your money. The farmers did not want money. They wanted gold, silver, and jewelry. So Mom had to scrounge around the house and say, oh, well, we'll barter. This is a word I always remember. We have to barter for food. Well, one day, she left, and I was home with my 2 little sisters and my dad, who could not get out of the house. And I forgot to tell this. This is the very first war that was fought with planes. So we were in constant fear of being bombed or the planes being shot down by the Germans. The Germans were still fighting. They were in our country. They were not fighting us. They were fighting the people up in the sky. Now, I have to get up again. So the Netherlands is here. England is here, where all the big bases are. So they fly over the North Sea. Of course, they have to fly over Holland to go to Germany. Night after night after night. Planes, I don't know how many, planes flew over my country to go and bomb Germany. And in those days, those planes were so loud. It was a constant brrr in your mouth. So here you lay in your bed. It's pitch dark, of course. By that time, we had no more electricity. Pitch dark, you lay in bed and you pray. You pray a lot that, please, don't those planes come down. They were not going to bomb. We were not afraid of bombs. But the Germans were shooting on those planes. And we didn't want one of those planes falling on our house. So this is why I want to emphasize there is so much fear for people during war. You know, they don't talk about that much. They talk about shooting each other. So we had the fear that something would fall out of the sky, and we had the fear now that we get less and less food. There is no more food. But, you know, I had a wonderful mother. She could do anything. And for instance, we talk about food. Food was very important. But when you are 10 years old and the war starts, and then you become 12 and you become 14, your feet grow, and you outgrow your shoes, and you outgrow your clothes. And you know, but Mom was wonderful, and she taught me how to knit, and I could rip out old sweaters and then make new sweaters, two different sleeves maybe, but that's okay, you know. You learn a lot. I have learned a lot during the war. So, we were talking about school. I told you school went on. Yes, school in Holland is very important. So we had school, but towards the end of, in 1944, 1945, all the paper was gone. We had no more paper to write on. Our pencils were worn out because we had screwed them up so much. So we went back to slates. And many people nowadays don't even know what a slate is. But I did my homework on a slate. And you carried that to school this morning. And we had nurses. So I went to Catholic school. So we had nuns who were, and they were very, very, very good. But that was another fear. Oh, we have no more paper, and I have no shoes. So the last few months of the war, I wore wooden shoes. You had to, because, you know, there was nothing. Can you imagine walking in a store like Target, and there is absolutely nothing in the store? That's how it was. Same with the grocery stores. Nothing in the stores. So there are so many things to talk about. But to me, I still have, occasionally, I have a little fear, but then I think, oh God, this is nothing like World War II. Like people talk to me and I said, oh, with the COVID coming on, and I was not afraid. Because I told the people, I survived World War II. Nothing can happen to me. You know, there is always a way that you can do things. Now, the last year of the war was the worst, of course, because we had no electricity, we had no gas, and water only an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. So can you imagine a mother having to fix something to eat every night? So we had a little pot-belly stove in the living. That was the only room that was warm. A little pot-belly stove. And we always used coal before, because we had coal in the Netherlands. Well, that was all gone. So no gas. How do you cook? No gas, no electricity, no nothing. So pretty soon all the trees were cut down in the streets. We had beautiful trees all along the street. They were all gone. Only my grandfather and I went to get the wood because my dad had to stay home. Then we found out that our trains didn't run anymore because the Germans had taken all our trains to Germany, and we had no trains running. But we still had the railroad ties, and underneath are these big blocks of wood. What do you call them? Railroad ties. Right. So a couple of the girls in my street, my age, we went to the railroad ties, and at night, some of the men had snuck out and kind of done the ties, so us girls pulled those ties from underneath the rails, and this was also in the heather fields where the droppings were. I had my bicycle, no tires, and then somebody had to help me to get one of those railroad ties on the saddle and the steering wheel, and that's how I walked home, at least 3/4 of a mile, because the railroad ties were through the heather fields to Amsterdam. But then you come home, and you cannot put one of those whole big railroad ties. It's just... So see, you become very... Well, thank goodness at night that Dad would make smaller pieces, and then Mom and I would stand there and have one of those big saws on one of those stands. And then with the axe, you had to make smaller pieces to put in that pot-belly stove. And that's how we boiled water and ate. When she had been to the farmers, oh gosh, she was gone for almost a week when she was gone. And she came back and she had one bag of oats. And, oats, what do you do? Well, Mom said, we still have that old coffee grinder. Let's see what we can do. So here I am, almost 15 years old, and we put those oats in the top. If you can visualize a coffee grinder, an old-fashioned coffee grinder, you put the oats in there, and here I sat for hours. And then it was not beautiful flour, it was still crummy. Well, good, we could make something out of that. So Mom would put some water on it and make some kind of a pancakes, We had no butter, we had no oil. She had one of those big old-fashioned cast iron frying pans. And she would heat that up, and then she would make little pancakes out of those oats and water. If you really wanted, but there were lots of people who did not survive because there were a lot of older people, and they could not do those things for themselves. And the Germans didn't help you one bit. Like one of my sisters got a very bad infection in her arm, and we went to one of these old Dutch doctors, but he couldn't do anything. He had nothing. He had no stuff to put on. He didn't have bandages or anything. She died. She died in 1992. And that was very sad. No hospital. There was a hospital, but it was used by the Germans. And they were not nice enough to say, oh, you can come in our hospital. Are you kidding? They were the enemy. So, I made a lot of notes, and I haven't looked at them. But maybe you have some questions? There's another question there.
Ma'am, what was your age at that time?
I was 14, 15, a teenager.
Okay. And that is a B-17 out there.
That's a baby 17.
That's a B-17.
Yes, yes. When I saw that plane the first time, I almost cried. I thought, oh, they saved us from starvation. You did. We were, and you know, even now, I have, not anymore, but I have traveled a lot since I retired. And sometimes you find Americans with a cap and it says World War II survivor. And I go up to them and I say, may I hug you? And they look at you and they think, what? I said, you saved my life. And they love to hear that, you know. You have saved so many, people have saved so many lives. I'm still friends with a 97-year-old American who was in the Pacific. But I met him on a cruise like that I went up to him and I said, may I hug you? And he was very surprised. I said, you saved my life. Oh, well, we are still friends. Are there any here? That's surprised? No. Because if I am 95, the guys that were flying those planes and dropping all that food, they were older than I was, so they are not with us anymore. No. Yes?
Yeah, the boxes and bags of food, were some of those grabbed by the inhabitants and taken to their homes, or did virtually all of that go to the town distribution center?
No, it all went to the town distribution center. You learn to share when you're hungry. Yeah. Yes?
How long after you were liberated did life return to normal? You had food in the stores. And how long did that take?
Oh, I would say 15 years or more before it was normal again. And especially as a woman, clothes, you know, you always had old clothes. So when I always had the idea I wanted to go to America. And I had 3 years of English in high school. But I figured I love to talk. So in 1955, which is 10 years after the war, I went to England and was an au pair with a family to practice my English. And how did I get to that story now? I practiced my English there.
Clothes. To go to America.
Oh, clothes. Yes. Well, England always had everything, had plenty of clothes and food and everything, because they were not really they were in the war, but they were apart in their own country. So when I was that's 10 years after the war, they had these beautiful woolen twin sets, a little sleeveless thing and a sweater. Oh, I went to the stores and I saw those, and gosh, I could afford one, so I bought one. But in those days, you could not take items from one country to another. You had to go through customs. And then you had to pay taxes on what you brought from one country to another. So I had this beautiful twin set, and I was so proud of it. And you know what I did? I wore it. Yeah. So it was not new, and I didn't have to pay import duties. But this is 10 years after the war, so it took at least 15 years before Holland was normal again, you know. Yeah.
What was Liberation Day like, May 5th? What do you remember about that day, and what did the town do?
Well, May 5th was quite impressive, because here we were liberated by the Canadians. And I was waiting out. No, that was a week before. We had the Canadians come in over the main road to come into my little town, and oh, you have no idea. People just didn't know what they wanted to do. They climbed on the tanks and so, but I forgot my little story here. Let's say 2 weeks before we were liberated, I was outside waiting for another dropping, and one of the tanks came down the highway, and I was standing there in the bushes because I didn't want to be seen, and it was green, and everything from the Germans was gray. All their tanks, all their uniforms, everything was gray. And here come the Americans and the Canadians, and they are in green. So I'm standing there, oh! Well, he stops the tanks, and he crawls from the top, and he comes walking up to me, and he said, "Where are the waterworks?" And they were right in the forest, right there in the little forest. So I said, "Over there." And I said, "Where are you from?" "Liverpool, England." Now, I have to explain that to you because we had the invasion in France, and the Americans went to Germany, and the English and the Canadians went up the coast to liberate us, because the Americans wanted to go to Germany. So that's how. But then when I was talking to this man from Liverpool, England, he just starts a cigarette. He gets in his bottle and I said, "Oh, you have cigarettes?" "Yeah," he said, "You want one?" And I said, "No, one for my father." Oh, you have no idea. I ran home and I said, "Dad, look what I have." "Oh, where did you get that?" Well, he finds a match, in those days you had match. He finds a match and I can still see his face. Tears dribbling over his cheeks, He hadn't had a cigarette in maybe 4 years. More questions?
Yeah, when did you get tires on your bicycle, and when did the trains come back?
Oh, now the trains came back pretty soon. But travel was terrible. We had no buses. Nobody had a car because we had to give those to the Germans. So we all had a bicycle without tires. Well, I would say, it's a couple of years, at least 3 years before we got tires and before the cars came back. The trains, because that was the only transportation, the trains came back pretty soon because we had to, we had no trucks. The trucks were all taken in Germany, and they were in Germany. So, no, it took quite a while. The war was not over right away. Oh my gosh, look at all this. This gentleman over there.
When you were asked to bring your radios in, did your family keep their radio, or did you bring it to them?
Now, was there a difference between radios? Say it a little louder.
Did you surrender your radio to the Germans, your family?
We didn't have one.
No problem.
No, not everybody was rich enough to have one of those nice big Philips radios where you have a knob and you can get Rome and all those no, we had a little box on the wall, and that came from downtown somewhere. No, I'm sorry, no, we didn't. Yes, over here.
Yes, I have 2 questions. Do you recall any Jewish families hiding in your town?
No, I did. But we were a very happy country, and I didn't know the difference between a Jew and a Christian. I didn't know. They had to explain, my parents had to explain to me that they were Jewish people and Hitler didn't like the Jewish people. And I said, well, thank goodness we are not Jewish then.
But you didn't know if any they were hiding in any homes?
No, well, for a while in the beginning, but it became very difficult for the Jewish people to hide. Now, there were a lot of little villages around my town, and I know they were there. But no.
The other question is, when you were lifting the railroad ties, were there any German troops controlling the population? Did you encounter any German troops when you were taking
No,
these?
no, because they were all in the war.
They were all, okay.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Yes.
When did your father dig up his silver?
Grandpa, oh, that was quite, well, I think right away. Because I got that bracelet right away. I'm the oldest granddaughter, so I got the bracelet. And I should have worn it. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
When, before your liberation, had the Germans already left? Had the German, your occupying force that was controlling the town?
No, they were still there.
They were still there when the Canadians came?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there was nothing they can do, they knew, after the food droppings, they knew that the end of war was close. Mm-hmm.
What was it like? What was the sound and the feeling like when the B-17s flew so low over your head?
Oh, we were scared to death. Oh, gosh. We had never seen a plane. See, this is the first war that planes were used. And planes were, oh, God, it was something different. This was like now something from the moon. Oh, all these planes. And I would tell my dad, how come they don't fall down? No, they were full of bombs too. No, it was very loud. They were so loud, and it was not one plane coming over. During the night, every night, they would fly from England to Germany to bomb the cities. Well, maybe there were 40 or 50 planes flying over my town or over the area, because, only one plane would fit one county. We didn't realize they were so big. My goodness, I laid in bed at night, and it was a loud, you couldn't sleep. So you lay crinkled up in bed, praying that one of those planes would not be hit by the German guns, and fall on your house. Yes?
Ma'am, when you went to school, did the Germans take over what you were taught?
No, I don't think, no. I don't remember that. When you had other things on your mind. We had wonderful handwriting, and we learned geography and the history of Holland, but no.
Thank you.
I don't know how to answer that question. You did. Here there's only, I was only what? The war, I always forget how old I was. I was, let's say, 10 when the war started, 15 between 10 and 15. There was so much going on in the world that I guess my little mind was just, I don't know. Yeah, what would you say? 2 more. You first.
Yeah,
Were you and the other kids able to keep up with your schooling, or did that at some point stop?
Oh, that was, no, it didn't stop. It definitely didn't stop. But because the schools in Holland are very, very good. But no, there was so much on the outside, you know. I still have all my report cards from those years. And they were good. I was a good student. Yeah.
How old were you when you first rode on an airplane yourself, and what did you feel?
That's a good question. Now I have to think, because I told you I lived in England to practice my English, and I had met somebody there who said, if you ever want to come to Spain, I have a job for you. So going home after a year living in England, and you come with mom and dad again, you think, maybe I should go to Spain. So I lived in Spain. I lived in Spain for 4 years. And what was your question?
The first time you rode on an airplane.
The first time that I went to Spain, I hitchhiked. Because the trains, there was only mainly one train a day. Very expensive. So in those days, you hitchhiked. It's a long ways from Holland to Barcelona, Spain, but I hitchhiked. So I lived in Spain for a few years, and I wanted to go home real bad. And that's when I had I flew from Madrid to Amsterdam. And that must have been 55, 56, 57, 58. 58 or 59. And that was a coincidence too, because I flew from Barcelona to Amsterdam, and we stopped in Brussels, and King Boudewijn got on the plane. I had never seen a king in my life before. But here he was flying on the same plane I was. That was funny, yeah. 58. So I was almost, 30 years? And now kids fly when they are 6 months. Yeah. Well,
how did you end up in Tucson, Arizona?
Well, I got to Tucson, Arizona through Gail. I live in Prescott.
Okay.
I live in Prescott, Arizona. And she came to pick me up to drive me to Tucson. But I lived in California for 3 months, 3 years, and then I came to Arizona.
When you had an opportunity, you wanted to come to America. How did you get here?
Well, my sister had come to Santa Ana, California, Orange County. Oh, I would say 4 years before I finally was ready to come. So I came, and I did not want to fly. I thought I can fly in the future. I came by boat from Rotterdam to New York. And then I got on it. I wanted to do the old-fashioned way, you know. I wanted to really immigrate on a boat to America. And in New York, I took the train all the way across to Los Angeles.
No hitchhiking?
No. No, that was only the very few years after the war, you know. No, nobody had a car. There were no cars. There were no buses. There was nothing. And a train once a day. And planes, oh God, nobody flew in those days. You walked. And it was too far to walk, so we just... But in those days, Those days were different. You know, you don't do that now because the world has changed. The world is more dangerous. In 1965, 66, 67, people cared about each other. We survived. And you never heard about raping and things like that. You never heard. I lived in a very nice, calm time. Over the years, it has changed. That was a good question. Yeah, you don't think about those things. But I think I have had a very interesting life. Yeah. And I love to talk about it. Because not everybody was so lucky to go. Well, going through a war is not lucky. It just happened. And you made the best of it. I learned that from my parents. So if something bad happens in the world now, you know that you can always make it. Right?
Any other questions?
Thank you for viewing this installment of the 390th Memorial Museum's Witness to History series. If you believe this is a valuable museum service, please consider supporting the museum through a tax-deductible donation, becoming a museum member, or visiting our gift shop. Please go to www.390th.org for more information.
Master and ignition switches. On. Batteries and inverters. Turn on number 1 battery. Voltage, 26 volts. Parking brakes and hydraulic check. Brakes on. Pressure? About 800. Check. Booster pumps and pressure. On. Check. Signal to start number 1.